Welcome to my engraving studio. I'm Karri Gregor, the Artist Engraver. So glad you could join me today. In this last video of this series, I'm going to continue the hand engraving of a Colt 3rd generation single action army pistol. Part 5 is all the bits left and the engraving equipment I use. Let's get into it! This is Chinese white watercolor paint. That's the color of the paint, it's not the brand. This one I think is Grumbacher. Just use a watercolor paint. I know there's a few of you that have asked the question, what kind of paste do you put on to do the drawing? Well, this is what it is. It is a watercolor paint, and I use Chinese white. Once I have smoothed the paint out and it's dried and you have it looking as much like paper as you can, that takes a little bit of technique to get that smooth. I find where the middle of the design is going to be, both horizontally and vertically. Now this one, I'm offsetting it slightly because of the hole for the screw on the other side. So you have to decide whether you want to incorporate things like holes into your whole design, or if you want to offset and treat it like a set apart space where the screw is going to go, and then, you know, balancing that out. And I decided to do the offset. So here I am drawing the image. This is a scroll that comes out from the center and radiates onto both sides. So it has to be mirrored on either side, and the scroll kind of is a pinwheel in the center. And I draw the circles using the template and then go in and draw all the design by hand. I'm using the design that I had been using for the entire piece, and it is sort of a standard Western type scroll. It's got nice full leaves on it. It's not like the English. The English scroll tends to have just lines radiating out from a part. This one sort of treats the whole thing as a growing entity. If you are interested in getting some custom engraving done, start the process by sending me an email. The address is in the description box below the video. There we go, all done that part. Looking good.
You ain't saw no prettier sight since my pansy's 4th husband, Uncle Udi, come home after 10 years of being stoked by a band of picket wire river parts, and I mean that.
Let's talk about how I can move that piece so nicely while I'm drawing on it. It's sitting on a pedestal. This is a GRS pedestal that I purchased to support my Vise. It's a really nice pedestal. You can swivel it and telescope it up or down and tighten it in any place. It supports any weight that I have presented or put on it. It supports any kind of weight that I have experienced, and you simply tighten it with just hand tightening. I don't have to use a wrench or anything, and it's tight. Now, on top of the pedestal is sort of a tire stopper, and then the ball sits, and on top, see, now these are magnetic grips that I put into my vise. I'm demonstrating this with a cylinder, and they're rubber on one side so they don't damage the piece, and yet I can tighten nicely and it will hold that securely no matter how I'm engraving. So this is my equipment. That ball will swivel. Look at this. Just moves all around on top of that tire support. Oh, I'm going to move it down a little bit here so you can see better. There we go. It'll move complete 360, 180, I don't know what the dimensions are, but it moves around and then also spins. It's a great vise, the ball vise. That one is GRS. Here's the design that I sent off to the owner for approval. And now we are going to cut. Now I'm really putting that ball vise to good use. I use the spinning factor for some of the drawing, but it is for the engraving that I particularly need this ball vise. This engraving is a multi-hand. I am controlling the angle of the graver of the bit with my right hand. That's on your left. I can control the bevel, the overlay, this kind of thing. The depth, I control that with my right hand, but the direction, every time I am going in a circle or moving, I'm moving the ball vise. So it's a two-handed thing. You really, you gotta chew gum and pat your head. So I turn the vise, turn the work clamped into the vise into the graver with my left hand. See, coming around, coming around, and I stop the vise, stop the pedal. You can hear the pedal stops or lessens, and then I move the vise. I don't move the vise when I'm not actuating the action of the graver, the pedal. So that's the other appendage that I'm using when I am engraving, is my foot is controlling the speed. And we go a little bit out of focus because I can't be watching from the camera at the same time. Now this is all cut, so I'm going to take a drop of water and wash off that watercolor paint. This is what makes this paint so nice. You don't need it to have a solvent to remove it. You're not worried about taking off some kind of finish or dulling the shine. It's just a little water, and dry it well. And now I'm going to come in with the dot punch and do the background. These dot punches are my favorite. I do love to use them. I'll be talking about dot punches in a little bit.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I won't.
Now we move on to the trigger guard, and I'm putting the Chinese white on there and tapping it until it comes to a certain point when it's dry and it looks as much like paper as I can get it. I find the center of the trigger guard and start drawing the circles. This is a nice touch because you've got the backstrap, the bottom of the backstrap, then the trigger guard, and then I'll be doing something on the bottom of the gun. And so it's a real three-dimensional look to the bottom of the gun with the design stepping down. I've split up the engraving of this piece into shorter videos by part. I should mention that you don't have to get the whole piece engraved at one time. You can start with a cylinder, then a backstrap, and then go on to the rest. It's a way of spreading out the cost. Something to consider. I've gotten approval for this. Now, trigger guard. You see how I've got the gun clamped in there very securely. Love the vise. What I have to watch when I come around with this piece on the trigger guard is the handle of the gun, the inside of the frame of the gun. You see how that is sticking up? Well, when I make a complete circle, that's going to come around and it will hit my hand. So it's part of being an engraver. You just have to be aware of where everything is. See, I am looking through my goggles at that focused point where the trigger guard is. There, it just hit my hand. And I felt the touch and I stopped. You have to be aware where that handle is when you start engraving and plan your engraving so you can do as much as possible before you have to stop. Now, I could not move my hand around the handle. I have to stop because otherwise it's going to have a corner, it's going to have a shake, it's going to look jagged. And this is just part of engraving. You have to be aware where everything is so you're not surprised when that comes around and hits your hand. You just have to be aware. Okay, here's a slightly different angle. This is something that I have to do too, is when I'm taking video, then I have to get up and move the camera and everything. There's no camera person here, it's just me. So here we're going to look at a slightly different angle. Isn't that Vise great? Just moves around. There's a full circle almost. See, I started it near the, oh, this is sped up. I started it near with my hand near, so then it comes around full circle, and I end up with the handle on the other side of my hand. So just takes a lot of planning and knowing what you're working on. A little dot of water, and we are getting it cleaned up. Doesn't that look good? Now on to the dot punch for the background. The background does certainly not need very much dot punch work. I have to find the space to have a single line of dot punches. It's so small. When this is blowing up on the screen like this, you don't have an appreciation for how small this little engraving on the trigger guard actually is. And if you listen, it sounds like I hit the dot punch twice. And that's not what's happening. You only want to hit it once, but what you hear is me putting the hammer on the top of the dot punch to ensure that it is at right angles to the dot punch so that it's level. The hammer is going to hit level on there so that the dot punch doesn't skid. So you hear that little check. There we go. Dot punch just inside the design, not outside the design. That's what we've been doing on this piece. A lot less dot punch work, but it adds a little bit of extra so there's some depth. It's beautiful. I have a very light engraving hammer. It's not nearly as expensive as some. In fact, this was one of the cheaper ones, and my husband put in this screw to hold the head on because it kept sliding up. But I don't use it for much else than just the dot punch work. I spent most of my budget on the engraving system that I have, and not as much on the hammer because of this. The dot punches that I use are Engraver. Engraver. That's what I use. They are very old school. I have to phone my order in. It's like the letter N graver. I have to phone my order in, and I hope they will be in business for a very long time because I absolutely love these dot punches. But, you know, who knows? So if you've got a good source for things like dot punches, tell me in the comments below. I'm always looking for good sources.
On my worst day, I could beat the hell out of you.
I don't think so.
Here we are putting some Chinese white on the housing of the loading pin. Smooth that out until it is dry and like paper. Then I'm finding the middle of the design. So this is slightly offset. There's going to be two designs going on this gun on the barrel, or the barrel end of the gun, on the underside, and that's what we're dealing with in this video, is all the underside bits. This design is scroll coming out of checkering. I've got a checkering design in the middle, and then the scroll grows out both sides. This is a design that I came up with. I haven't seen anybody else do this. Do you see what I mean? It's got the cross hatching or the checkering in the middle. Scroll grows out on both sides. But I think it fits. It fits. It's just a new way of doing an old thing. It definitely looks like something period authentic. And here we're doing the first cut of that design. Not very much movement because it's the curve, just slightly curved along the side. There's a couple of things to be aware with while I'm engraving this. We've got quite a curvature of the housing, so I have to accommodate that as I'm handling the beveling with the right hand, you know, with the bit. So I have to angle and be aware. If it's curved and not flat, then I have to be conscious that I'm going to keep my depth the same, because you can so easily just go into the piece feeling like it should be straight. But this is curved, so you have to accommodate the curve with the depth of the piece, as well as maintaining your bevel or your overlay. And that's something too. Overlay should always turn outward from the design. So this one, I'm doing the backbone of that flare at the end. So the overlay turns out. It doesn't turn in, or it makes your design small. Squishes it up. So you always have to be conscious of where the overlay is going. Are you enjoying this video? Please share it. You would really be helping me out. Sharing, liking, subscribing, and commenting all help with the YouTube algorithm. And it would be nice to get something for making these videos. Please do your part to support the show. Here's a slightly different angle so you get some idea on what it looks like from an observer's point of view instead of what I see when I'm working on it. As much as possible, you can't exactly see what I see. These are straight lines that I'm doing. So the bevel has to be equal on both sides, but they have to be straight, and I can't dig into the piece, into the gun, into the metal. I don't want to dig into it. I want to keep that same depth as I go over the curve. So even straight lines take a lot of concentration, because you have to be aware of all these things. And if I go deep, then it'll look really scooped. You know, you'll have these divots. So I have to maintain that, and the straightness of the line looks different when it goes over a curvature too. When you're looking at it, it's just an optical illusion type of thing, an optical device. You almost have to curve it a little bit to make it look straight.
That gun shoots straight. I wouldn't sell it if it didn't.
It's okay, kid.
This is my air engraver. It is a Steve Lindsay air engraver. These dials tell me the pressure. I can adjust the pressure through the knobs on the top. This tube is feeding the air from the air compressor to the device. And I can turn it off and on with a switch here at the top. So I can stop my engraver that way. Now, the air goes through some of these tubes, and I can operate the amount of air pressure that I apply with a foot pedal. So that gives me the speed of the device. Here, I'm just going to put this down on the floor. And now we've got the tubes coming from the pedal and into the device, and then now it goes to this. So it feeds from the air compressor, and then it goes into this little air hose. Everything's translated into this. And if we follow this air hose to the end, we will get to the tool. It is very long so that I can, you know, have it, the device or the equipment away from me. This is the air graver. This is the Steve Lindsay design. It has a little hammer inside, so if I put the graver or the bit into the device, I just have to orientate it correctly. And then, I'm trying to show you and do it at the same time without covering it with my hands. It's kind of hard to do. So I use that little screw on the top to tighten it in. And that is the graver. There's a little hammer inside of the handpiece that gets fed with the air. So it does the little jackhammer thing. It's just a miniature jackhammer. That's what it is. I mean, Steve Lindsay was quite ingenious to come up with this idea. I put a little plastic sleeve on there because the sides of the graver can be very sharp. And so this is the device that I use. This is my silent air compressor. I was using a pancake air compressor before, and it was so loud. I engrave inside my house, and the pancake was just my husband put it in the basement and then drilled a hole up through the floor so that the noise would be contained in the basement, but it still was too loud. Now, if you listened here, you can hear. It is, I'm guessing it's a revised air compressor from a refrigerator. And that's about as much noise as it makes. It's wonderful. I just love it. A dot of water is all it takes, and then we can clean off the pin housing. Once again, you can hear that almost double tap sound because I'm checking the level, and then I don't get as much scooting. I, used to do the hit, 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 and, I was going, why can't I keep this on the piece? It was a good thing it was practice pieces when I was learning. But man, this design requires one dot inside each of the squares in the checkering part, and then of course the dot at a background. Any questions? Drop them in the comments below. And if I didn't explain that well enough before, here you see, I touch the top and then hit. It's quite fast actually, so it does sound like it's a double hit. But it's a way of me checking before I actually put the indent in the piece. And you can see how I move the dot punch. It's going around a curve. So that checking to be the level is really important, because when I put that dot flat to the piece, the angle at the other end is vastly different. So if I don't hit it square, if I don't hit it at right angles, then that dot punch will scoot across the surface and give me a ugly scratch. There we go. Dot's all done. Let's take it out of the vise and have a closer look. Clean off all of the shavings. There we go. That's the top of the design, and now we have this nice scroll checker combination on the pin housing. I picked up the design from the checker on the side. Another part of equipment is my visor. You can see this is the part that clamps around my head with the padding for my forehead. It's very hard on the plastic, but on the forehead. But then you can see I can rotate it up and down so it positions in front of my eyes. It magnetizes about 10 times, but I can use the monocle if I need to get and see something closer. I use the monocle a lot when I'm sharpening the graver bits. Now, my husband found this marvelous little piece. I've got batteries inside. These are the lights. So it takes a couple of AA batteries, and I put that in there, and I've got it all duct taped to my, or electrical tape to there, and it looks like, the aliens are landing here, but look at that lovely light. I don't have to fuss where outside lights are placed on the work. With this visor, when I turn the lights on, I can see where I am working. I can see the work. Okay. This is a surprising piece of engraving equipment. Yes, it's a glue gun. It's not fancy. It's just your standard, everyday craft store variety glue gun. And it uses regular glue sticks. Nothing incredibly. It simply heats in, plugs in to heat up, and then I'm ready to put hot glue on a piece of scrap wood that I can clamp into the vise. This just makes awkward pieces fit into the vise and be very secure as I'm engraving. So I just put the glue on the top, press the metal in, and this is a fantastic way to secure things in the vise.
A gun is a tool, Marion. No better, no worse than any other tool.
Let's put the glue gun to work. As you can see, I have got a wood block in here. I have got a lot of glue on the wood block already. I softened you can see that in another video. I softened up the existing glue from previous job and then put the gun into it and then go along the sides just to firmly fasten in with new fresh glue right there at the join where the gun is sticking out of the glue, and we are putting some fresh hot glue on there that's going to hold it. I'm going to tip it over so it doesn't run in. Now once it's dry, this is so very secure. I love the glue gun because it solves a million clamping problems, and the piece does not move when it's in the glue this way. Now I'm going to be doing that design where it kind of spins out from the middle on the bottom of the barrel, the underside of the barrel. And you know, finding the center. I wanted to continue the angle. I don't know if you can see that from the side piece so that it angles down. We've got a nice angle down there, and we got approval, so let's start cutting. If you go back and listen to my video on the top of the barrel and doing the barrel, and you'll understand my concern for the angle and where the end of this part of the scroll falls, because I want to continue a line that I've already started at the top. I've got more pictures of pieces I've done on my website, TheArtistEngraver.com, on Instagram and Facebook. Check the description below for links. Now, this little part here, I don't know if you can see the difference there. Instead of putting a leaf in the end there, I am going to stick in my signature. So I am actually engraving at this point my initials. I hid them in the design of the scroll. So it's on the counter side, there is a leaf bud coming off, and on this side it's going to be my initials. Now I'm doing the flare at the end of the scroll down the barrel, but yeah, I tucked my initials right in there and signed the piece. I don't do it every time on some of the bigger pieces, well, because the smaller pieces you can't. If you're just putting somebody's name on there, I'm not going to hide my initials in that. But on one of these pieces that is more of the entirety of the gun, I sometimes try and hide an initial or a signature. Hopefully, and some future date, that's going to increase the value of the piece because of the artist that did it, and you actually have it signed.
I like your style, dude.
Once again, we are turning the vise around every time I come around. I come to a certain point, and when I stop, I let up on the pedal. I don't know if you can hear that. Reposition my hand. That's what I'm doing, is I can't have my hand go all the way around. When I have to reposition my left hand on turning the vise. So when I run out of room to turn, I stop, and I stop engraving. I keep the graver still, and then reposition my hand and move it again. This shows you the dance that it really is. I'm operating it with my foot. I am controlling the angle, the depth, the bevel, and overlay with my right hand, and with my left hand I am moving the piece into the graver to cut it. And I have to be aware of the body of the gun as it comes around every time. So you can see I've designed my attack on this piece so that I don't have to stop midstream as much as possible. Sometimes you can't help it, but you have to have a plan. How are you going to handle it if you can't get completely around with one cut? There we go. One drop, clean it up. Then we come in, do the dot punch work. And I'm speeding this up just so you can see a little bit more. You can actually see the tip of the dot punch, which you can't see that in all other shots. There we go. Doesn't that look lovely? That dot punch just makes the scroll pop right out, the negative space. When you're working on a design, you have to think about negative space as well as the design and placement of the piece. We are off to the freezer so we can get this gun out of the glue. It's going to just sit in there with my whole wheat bread. Hello, Duke. And a few hours later, out it comes, nice and frosty. Let's get it into the vise so we can just pop it right out. Now watch this. Zip. There we go. Comes right out of the glue. Now there's some residue. You can see where I put the hot glue that really helped with the grip. So I'm taking a plastic kitchen utensil and chipping off that glue. So the plastic is not going to harm the piece at all, but it helps me get the glue off. Since I have cut through the bluing, I have exposed the steel to oxidation, and I have to apply wax. This Renaissance wax is miracle stuff. It does not make the piece feel greasy, and it'll fill in all of those cracks with a protective coating. The only thing is that you have to reapply it after you handle the piece, because it'll rub off on your hands even though you can't see it or feel it. It is fantastic, and it keeps the fingerprints off. You're not going to see the fingerprints as easily, and it just shines a piece up really nicely. Next video will be either a knife or a 1911 Colt with oak leaf scroll. I haven't decided. Click the subscribe button and hit the bell so you will be notified when the video is posted. This is something I do with all the pieces that go through my studio. I cover them with Renaissance wax, and that preserves them until it gets to the owner and he can decide how he wants to proceed with making sure that oxidation doesn't ruin the engraving. It doesn't take much engraving to make a gun look special, but all the bits and pieces do set the gun off for a full effect. Send me an email if you are interested in getting some gun engraving for yourself. I can give you a free estimate. It makes a great gift to get or to give. Click this link to get some ideas from other pistols, and this link for the 7 steps to getting your gun engraved. See you next time.